Hey everyone, welcome back. And in this episode, I'm talking to Sean McGuire. He's a design thinker, brilliant workshopper from Microsoft, and he's an author also of Billboard design thinking. And in this session, we're going to discuss a lot of things, like controversies about design thinking. Where should you use it? Where shouldn't you use it? Like, because it's a tool, and how to flatten the egos and hierarchies in this session, how to bring the people together, and many other factors which, let's say, you as a leading or growing designer can benefit from a lot. Doesn't matter at what point do you come in to shape the experience and what your title is. You're gonna get a lot out of this. So enjoy this session. Make sure to leave your feedback, comments, and everything else where you found this episode. If you're watching it or listening it, do enjoy. And on that note, Sean McGuire. I'm gonna start with, it's been a while, and you've been, I feel like, one of the most influential people for my own development in terms of like facilitation, workshops, things of that nature. So I'm definitely viewing you as a mentor. Thanks for coming on ultimately. And how have you been? What's new with you, Sean?
Yeah, it was nice. I think it was like 2 years ago when I met you in the London studio. So that was really nice. I don't know, because the good thing, I'm still in business and I've been doing nothing else than design thinking workshops. So probably whatever I'm doing makes sense for other people. But I think if you do it on a continuous basis, it's a gradual change. It's hard to actually see what the real big difference is. Also because I kind of, for each workshop, I always collect my feedback and I always try to improve one thing, because you can't make everything better. And so actually every workshop is a little bit different, and just try to make it better and better. I don't know where that's going to end.
Yeah. And that's, I guess, like for everyone listening, like that's your forte, right? Like you're like specializing, and like we just had the chat with you every week, and you kind of said like, or at least what I got from what you said was like design thinking and workshops and facilitation is the only thing you want to do. Maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but
no, it just happened. It was nothing like that I chose. It's not like a career where you go and kind of say, hey, what could I do with my life? And then says, hey, you're a perfect design thinker. Well, it just happened, and I don't know exactly why. But maybe the intriguing thing for me is two things: listening and meeting people. And that constant over and over again. And the nice thing maybe as a moderator, because I always say in my trainings, the moderator is the dumbest person in the room. And what I mean is they have nothing to contribute. Yeah. I mean, and you should not be contributing. And that puts you in a position that you're doing two things. You're observing people and you're listening to what they're sharing about their lives. And that's always interesting, always in different constellations. But rather than meeting hundreds of people and talking about the weather, you're always talking about different projects, ideas. And most of those projects, or let's say workshops, are about people being super enthusiastic about changing the world. They want to build something that's going to make them rich, or it's going to change the environment or make people happy. But in general, those workshops are always about very positive topics with people trying to help each other or build something or change, make a better change for the future. And maybe that's one of the things that's really always is intriguing.
so do you see yourself, I guess, more of as a helper than a driver, right, for that change or for those ideas? Or like, how do you see yourself as if you're in a room and you're there to, to do design thinking, or you're there to facilitate, moderate, like what's like, how do you place yourself, if that makes sense? Like, who are you really in that room?
Yeah, the way I explain it is, and that's the way I see myself, as a bus driver, really. Like in all of those, I think I told the story the last time as well, but in all of the big cities, you have those red or green buses, like this hop-on, hop-off buses. And the way I design the workshops, it's always, let's say, discrete or individual tasks you're doing, and once you're finished, and this is like the stop. And my only job is to bring the people from the question, so the initial question, the workshop, we want to do X, Y, Z, to the goal. And that's kind of whatever we promise to deliver. And what I want to ensure, no one is derailed, but they also are at the liberty, they don't have to care about anything. Everything's carefree. So I always tell them what to do. It's like it's the same. You go to Paris, you want to explore Paris, you take your map. Now you have to go and look for underground. You have to get a taxi. That's all a big hassle. If you get into that red bus, you just get in. Yeah, you sit on the top. You make your pictures. You have to care about nothing. Yeah, and that's the only thing that I'm doing, bringing them from A to B. But the bad news is, yeah, that you only have one line, and it's the only thing you can go. You can't make a choice. You can't say, oh, I'm at the Louvre. Can you please bring me to my hotel? No. And you have to get off. So I'm very strict in the way, but I would see myself as a bus driver. I don't care too much what the people are doing in the back of the bus, as long as they kind of do their exercises. But my ultimate goal is I'm going to deliver them on time at the end of the workshop, at the goal with whatever we agreed with the workshop owner that we're going to deliver.
Yeah, and it's very interesting as well. Like I love analogies as well, and I feel like a lot of people would like they're gonna well understand this, but it's worth kind of maybe digging deeper into it because I guess with a bus, if you are a bus driver, there's usually an expectation from people who come to that bus, right? Like they know why they're there to get from A to B. But like, how do you, because it's a bit more than a bus driving when you need to set up, they need to know which bus they're joining ultimately, right? Like, what's your, I guess, from all the different years of experience and like you doing it, like do you feel like, I don't know, I wouldn't say a secret, but like, how do you actually do that? Because I feel like a lot of people would struggle with that. You know, they sometimes have workshops and they might come prepared, but like there is always a risk that someone is going to come to it and they're not ready for that journey, or they think they're taking a wrong bus maybe for in that analogy sense.
Yeah, I think everything is preparation. I kind of a few weeks ago wrote an article. If you want to improve your, let's say, moderation skills, maybe it's not about what you do in the workshop, but what you do before and after. So the one thing is, and I firmly believe it, you need ownership on customer side. That means you have a customer, a workshop owner, in the way I see it. I have one on the company side from Microsoft, so there's always one workshop owner on company side, and there's one workshop owner on customer side. So before you kind of draw that bus plan, you're going to be sitting down with the customer and agreeing those are the stops. So we have those 4, 5, 6 exercises, because in reality, in a one-day workshop, you have 3 to 6 exercises. You will never have 10 or 20, won't happen. And by carefully crafting it with the customer, and then also agreeing this is the workshop goal, and in most cases, the customer is going to open and say, this is what we want to do. I just need to assume that the customer knows exactly what we want to do, the workshop owner. If anyone says, hey, we're on the wrong bus, we don't want to do it, job done for me. I'm going to look at the workshop owner and say, hey, it's your guys, it's your ladies. You brought them in the room, It's not my responsibility to convince them, Please tell them why they're here. And there are 2 options. The one is this person has, let's say, the mandate and can say, hey, I brought you here because we're going to work on that, and he's going to manage the situation, or he won't, but it's not my responsibility. I'm really like a pilot, so here's your plan, fly from London to New York, and it's not my job to change that. Someone else is going to make, but I'm going to be part of the discussion where we're going to go and how we're going to get there. But once that's fixed up front, and I'll get a sign off from the customer, because before we do the workshop, I'm going to show them the poster. We're going to walk through all of the steps. I'm going to say, is this what you want? If they say yes, no, that's what we're going to deliver. Very rarely, I would say maybe 1 in 100 workshops, there's going to be big disruption somewhere in between, where we just figure out, and the workshop owner figures out, hey, actually, I wanted to do something else. Fine, we can manage that, but very seldom that will happen.
But that's very interesting. Like from my own experience and learning and kind of driving a lot of workshops, I feel like you probably clocked in thousands, probably even more. Like, I don't even know, but myself, I feel like I had so many workshops where you kind of need to have at least an ally in a way, or like, some sort of a person who would who would be there on your side if something goes wrong, or at least have some support. I've been to workshops where people come, let's say, they know that we have to be there. They have some pressures, they have the goals, and they know what we need to prepare, but there's still a bit of resistance. And what helped me in the past, I guess, is having the decision maker who's gonna work with me, or like what you described, kind of set the path straight, let's say, or, help out in other ways. But it's also sometimes, like, on the simplest terms, to me, what was really helpful is to include, I guess, a teammate, especially in the small teams. It could be, let's say, someone who's maybe a product manager, or someone who's, responsible in shaping solutions together or coming up with some ideas. But them being involved in the planning can then help out down the road, because, it's sometimes you need numbers basically to kind of work together. And I feel like I kind of felt, like I feel like it's that too, because sometimes you might not even have the decision maker in the actual room. At least from my experience, it could be that they don't show up, or, they might just be kind of sending their colleagues in, in kind of worse situations.
Yeah, I think what I use a lot, the poster and visuals. I think visuals are super important to align people. And what you're saying is, like, you can always point to a higher authority. In many cases, part of the poster design will be, what's the company vision? So if someone's saying, hey, why are we doing it? Well, that's your company vision. You want to do X, Y, Z, yeah? Or it will be kind of connected with a goal that everyone knows in the organization, and no one is going to kind of object, yeah? Let's say if the organization says, hey, our goal for 2023 is we want to grow our markets 50% in the US, and everyone knows it, they have been hearing it like 100 times from the leadership, and that's the thing you put in the front of the poster, and someone says, I don't want to do it, well, I'm going to be pointing at the poster and say, but you understand that you CEO, your leadership, that's your mandate, that's the core goal that you want to achieve in 2023, basically telling them how can you be against it. And even if you're against it, then please don't share that. And to that point, like, there's an exercise I do in many workshops is crafting a vision in the beginning. Like I say, for example, how would a press release look like? And what I'll do is I'll put a picture of Satya, and I'll put a picture of the CEO of the company. Yeah. And it's like, hey, we want to help those guys to be successful. And once you wrap your head around that whatever you're doing is not only for solving some Mickey Mouse problem, there's something behind it that's really part of, let's say, the DNA of your company. Very rarely will any resistance come. Worst case, if someone really does not want to participate, I don't take it personally, fine. Then please go out, have your meetings, do your emails. Yeah, if you don't want to be here and you think you want to spend your time with something else that's more valuable, fine. Makes a difference if one person more or less is in the workshop.
Yeah, and I definitely can echo that. I like that you mentioned the visual side, kind of come prepared, because, like, to me, and because I know that a lot of people who are going to be listening to this, they're going to be in UX specifically, and they're thinking about product design, which is, it's kind of less abstracted, it's super technical, but they might come into a workshop and they might come unprepared or don't have the prototype for collecting the information, or they come kind of, with a fresh slate and just kind of wing it, which to me is kind of a bit of a dangerous approach to getting someone in bought in. So I feel like that's really interesting. I want to like, on this note, I like that we segued here, but one of the quotes I found about you, and have so many bits, of course, to discuss, but one of I guess funny, but I also would like to hear your thoughts about it, was that, and I quote you, this is from one of the blog posts: "Design thinking templates are for idiots. Experts understand patterns." And this is almost like a bit dissonant, because you're creating the, like, Billboard design thinking has been something what I got inspired. I never kind of used Billboard design thinking as a standard, but I used elements of it, like, the flow and things of that nature. It made me a better design thinking facilitator, leadership strategy facilitator. But what did you mean by that quote? Like, what is understanding patterns instead of dates, because I also presume that a lot of people who are going to get started with design thinking, they're going to use templates. They might even use one of your templates.
Yeah, but the point is, and people often don't get it, like a template is a template, and a template basically means you can reproduce it, but you also can tweak it. Yeah? And if you don't understand what's behind the template, you don't know how to adopt it for a specific use case. Because unfortunately, like over the time, let's say I have standard templates like 100, yeah, but I probably have like 400 different versions I could use. But the point is, the template is just a segue to have a communication with the customer. To make it relevant for the customer, you always have to tweak it. A very simple example, like you have stakeholder maps, and the way I like to use stakeholder maps is I'll put the main stakeholder, or let's say the main user in the center. Then around I'll put a circle which is direct connected. That means, let's say you have a call center solution. Customer is talking with a call center person. He might be speaking with a salesperson, a person in a store. So anything where I have a direct contact, and it needs to also be in real time. So it's not email, is no direct contact. We get to know the person somehow. And outside from that, I would have indirect contact. So that might be someone sitting in an IT department, a procurement, a lawyer, whatever. That's also going to affect somehow the interaction, but this person is never going to know him. Let's say I'm a customer, I will never know the CEO of a large company, but still going to interact. Another question is, people say, hey, great, fantastic, yeah, but oh God, how should I actually use that template? Let's say you might have a workshop where you have 3 major stakeholder groups. Let's say you're building an application. So the one would be in-house people, part of the project, people that belong to the organization, yeah, but do not belong to the project team, and then outside stakeholders. So you would kind of cut it into 3 segments. But yes, you could also have 4 segments. Yeah, let's say you're working on sustainability, and now you're thinking about stakeholders. Oh, it's the NGO, it's the government. Yeah, then it's the company you're working for, and let's say you're doing something about green banking. Then it's the banking industry, and then it's the local communities. And if you can't figure out that here's a template that's essentially trying to figure out how is your main stakeholder connecting with other people in the world, and then kind of come to the conclusion that you might kind of tweak it and not only have one big segment, but 3 or 4 or 5, yeah. Once you get to that, then each of those templates is, you can have, let's say, thousands of different versions. In reality, for every workshop, you will create a new version. And that's, I think, where many people get stuck. They take the template, yeah, oh, it's like the business canvas. I take the business canvas, just use it for every company. But then there are questions on that business canvas, they're completely irrelevant for that company or for that workshop. Essentially, you're just wasting time.
Mm. So on a super practical terms, would you agree that, I guess, like my personal experience, I guess, and this is, I guess what works, right? Like if you're a practitioner and you can extract some actionable bits and you can get to your goal and results, I feel like you need to do a lot of improvising too and think on your feet, because you might uncover something you didn't know or something brand new. It's the whole idea of design thinking to me is kind of get to something which you prepare a lot, but you're trying to discover something extra or something which you didn't prepare. You want that kind of like a new thing. But like on a practical sense, it's kind of like my personal approach has been always to take the templates, and your templates, let's say, are great. Like I've been using a lot of them where I've kind of recreated them, or I use just a segment for a specific session, but not necessarily as is, because I kind of tend to agree that a lot of the canvases or a lot of the templates just might not be relevant, or you might need to tell, the user or participant of the workshop that, oh, we need to skip this part, or maybe you discover during it that, oh, it might not have been relevant. And I feel like they could sense that, you didn't really prepare that much, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think for me, I always try to make everything in every individual word on the billboard and also in the template super clear. And that's maybe the very hardest thing, because I think in the end, design thinking is only about asking very simple questions. People can't answer complex questions. And the way I built the billboards is actually you have one simple question with one visual. And when it's finished, you do two things. You have a new question and you have a new visual. So even if you're not paying attention, you understand we're talking about something completely different. It's a little bit like either you go in a supermarket, you can buy everything. People get confused. Oh God, what should I kind of buy? If you tell them, we're first going to go to the grocery store. You're going to buy all the groceries. When we're going to go out, then we're going to go to the butcher. And in the butcher, you're only going to get meat. And when we're finished, then we're going to go to the candy store. It's easier for the people actually to kind of focus what they need. Otherwise, they run back and forth. Oh, I need the meat. Oh, then I need my dessert. Oh, I forgot the fruits. Like, it's not efficient. Yeah. And the idea of a design thinking workshop is being super efficient. In order to be efficient, ask super simple questions, and they have to be really simple. And also the limitations when I design the billboards is on the top line, the question always needs to be short. It's always tentative. You write a long question, won't happen. So it needs to be in bold letters. You have 4, 5, 6 words, and you need to formulate that question and everyone can understand it and there's no misunderstanding. So, and that's also part of kind of shaping the template, where I said like templates are for idiots. The question, so the template is an abstract thing. It's like a cupboard where you can put in stuff, yeah? But the question behind it and the labeling of each of those boxes, what it is, actually makes the huge difference how you're going to use that template. And if you don't understand it, I think the template is totally useless.
Yeah, definitely. And sorry to kind of segue off, but like I just remembered one thing we chatted the other week, and it was, you mentioned specifically that design thinking is natural, right? And to me, it's, yeah, it is. But if it's natural, you know, and if it is really natural to every single kind of, I guess, human being, why do we need design thinkers? Like, why do businesses actually need? Like, why is there really a need for someone who would facilitate? Let's say, what's your take on that?
Simple answer: ego. And what I mean is, let's say people really don't listen. Yeah. And maybe one thing I learned from the pandemic is, since all of the workshops were online, kind of the transcripts and the way I do my documentations is I listen to all of those workshops and extract information from the transcript. And what gets very obvious, people will be asking questions. They won't even wait until someone gives the answer and come with the conclusion. Now, it's really about listening. And if you kind of look at, let's say, the design thinking methodology, or let's say the IDEO one, where you say emphasize, define, ideate, prototype, and test, what is it really about? Emphasize is nothing else. Whatever the user is telling me is more important than what I believe I know about the user. So I'm sitting down with a person saying, how do you want to use the software? If I'm a designer, I have all kinds of assumptions. Oh, he needs this button, he needs that, he needs a drop down. Now, it's very hard for people if they have, especially for creative people, they have a mental model how the world should look. And someone comes and tells them that's all crap. It's completely different. You know? So the first thing from those steps is really listen. And that's so very hard for us. And in order to orchestrate the conversation, like I always try in design thinking workshops, I don't want to have any discussions. Discussions are a waste of time. Yeah, we spend too much time with it. I try to ask simple questions, and then I want everyone to share their opinion, and everyone else should listen. And that's the way why I use the poster, because usually people will be writing things and then going to ask them, please come up, put your post-it on front and talk about it. I don't even care what's on that post-it, but what you're doing is you're creating this stage, and it's natural. Oh, the person in front standing, everyone else is sitting, putting his post-it on the wall, yeah, has something to say, and we're going to listen. And the tremendous interesting thing that happens in workshops is if you truly listen to what other people are saying, then it's, oh, that's interesting, yeah, rather than having it as a place where I'm going to talk about what I believe, yeah, like I'm promoting the stuff. And what you need is to orchestrate that. And in design thinking workshops, the worst thing that happens are, I call them the self-promoting people in organizations that tell everyone how fantastic they are and all the great ideas they had. Everyone knows it anyway because that's the only thing they do the whole day, yeah? What you're eager is to get out the other people or sitting behind the desk somewhere, often people with brilliant minds that don't have a place to actually share their ideas, and no one wants to listen and they simply have given up. And when they go out of the workshop, people say, oh, fantastic ideas. Well, all of those ideas probably already were in the minds of the people before they came. The only thing that you did is you gave them a place to listen, and you forced the other people to listen by the way that you're doing that. And I think that's the reason why we need moderators to orchestrate that conversation. Otherwise, the highest ranking person or the person who speaks the most or the loudest, and the other people who also have a lot of stuff to share and won't stand up and say, hey, it's my turn. Yeah, you need to help those people to also get a place to share their thoughts.
But do you think this is, I guess it sounds like quite disruptive, right? Like if you have someone coming in and creating almost this environment to put ego away for a sec and contribute and share. But do you why do you think the teams, let's say without it, like why is that ego even exists? And I guess, it's maybe a bigger question of a more philosophical take, but I feel like it's, design thinking to me has always been that there's always someone, like a lot of people practice it. They might not practice it in a structured way. There's, of course, a lot of people who would come in, let's say, as a consultant or as a third party to kind of share, to make that environment, to drop the egos and share. But why do you, if it's natural, and I'm not kind of challenging what I'm trying to kind of if the design thinking is truly natural, why wouldn't the teams or the squads or organizations, cultures kind of start with design thinking, I guess? Where does that ego come and where does the design thinking come?
Yeah, this probably is a contradiction because the way we live in hierarchical societies, and no matter what you tell me about this is a startup, they have no hierarchy. It's not true because the one guy drives a Ferrari and the other one does not. And that's also a hierarchy. Yeah? And the point is you need hierarchy in order to be organized and to work efficiently. And that's good. So you have top managers, middle managers, you have employees, they have different roles. So in a day-to-day life, you need the structure, otherwise a company can't work. Now, the problem is if you're going to get people from different, let's say, parts of organizations, and even, let's say, if I have a conversation, let's say Microsoft with a customer, we're different organizations, we have different goals, we're rewarded for different outcomes, yeah? Then what we will do naturally, yeah, we're going to kind of defend our turf and say, this is, let's say, our mandate, and this is what we're responsible for. This is our goals that we want to achieve, which is always egoistic things. And that's not bad, yeah? Because let's say the way I see, for example, any employee is rated and rewarded for the work he's done, and that's his job. And that's okay. So I, as an employee, let's say if I'm working as a design thinking moderator, my goal is to deliver great design thinking workshops, and that's the only thing I care about. Now the problem, in order to unlock the creativity, I need to tear down all of those organizational structures in the workshop. Why? Because, and this is the example I always give, let's imagine you're in a big room, yeah, you have the CEO, so Satya is standing in front of you and say, who has a great idea? Yeah, what's going to be the next innovation that's going to grow or triple Microsoft's revenue in the next 5 years? So who's going to raise his hand? Who's going to be so crazy? Because typically the things will happen is, oh, that guy just wants to show off. He just wants to show how smart he is. Yeah? You might be offending, let's say, your line manager. Oh, it's super simple. We just have to do X, Y, Z. And the CEO says, okay, that really makes sense. So why is my high-paying manager not figuring that out? But this guy over there does it. So there are many threats that you're doing. So you can offend people. You can ruin your career. Yeah, you could promote yourself. But the idea is, and this is all based on the hierarchy. Now, in the design thinking workshop, essentially what you're saying is, I don't care what your rank is. If you're the CEO or if you just joined the company 2 weeks ago, you're all equal, and that's the way I treat the people. And they also understand it, and they accept it because it's just for a short duration. It's for 4 hours or a day. And what you often observe in this organization, which is interesting, is before the workshop starts, oh, that's the CEO, that's the vice president, and so on. And there's a natural distance when the people have the conversation. In the workshop, employees will be brutally honest. Yeah, they're going to look at the CEO and say, do you know why our productivity is low? Oh, we spend 30% of our time with administrative stuff. Something he would never say in any other circle, because now we're asking them. So that's the way you break down the structure, because you're asking everyone to share the information. But the second thing that you're also ensuring is there are no politics. And what I mean with that, you're standing in front of a crowd. Yeah, there are 20 people of your organization. You're not going to come up and say something that's not true. You won't survive that. Like everyone can say that's not true. Yeah. So, and instinctively people understand this. This is we're going to work together. This is an exception. So we're going to break down the structure. But the moment the workshop is over, you can immediately observe. Yeah. Everything goes back. Oh, that's the CEO. I'm not going to approach him. Yeah. Like you will see people sitting in the workshop with the CEO on the same table. Workshop is over. They go out to the coffee machine. You can observe they have a different behavior. Yeah. And that's what you're giving them. So that's what I mean. You break down the ego because you don't have to defend your turf. But the goal is to solve a problem together. And that's what I tell the people is you get no reward because you wrote the great idea on the post-it. It's a team effort. And only the team can kind of solve the challenge. Any individual cannot do it. So I think that's part of the magic. But you also have to understand, and I always say, you can only use it in homeopathic doses. Yeah, you can do it once a month or every 2 weeks. But if you're going to do it every day, yeah, then those hierarchies are going to kind of be infiltrated into your design thinking workshop, and it's not going to do the magic you want to do.
There is also, I guess, you kind of create your own hierarchy in a workshop as a moderator, as a facilitator, but you become more of like a servant leader, I guess, because it's about the actual workshop team. And again, you, I guess, as a bus driver are carrying them on, towards that destination. But that's fascinating. And it's kind of like very interesting. Like, how did you see the things, as someone who's has so much experience in it? But I remember when you kind of hinting at it as well here, but also we talked about that before, is when you said about design thinking being, I guess, all about conversations too.
Yes.
But I feel like myself, and this is maybe my personal pain point, when I tend to facilitate different workshops, like there is, I guess, a good standard of how many people you should have in a workshop so that you have enough time for everyone to speak. But there's always that dynamic where not everybody can actually contribute fully. And I don't know, like, if you have any tips maybe, or any advice for myself or anyone else who's listening in, of like how to actually quickly break that ice so that people can actually contribute, but also being cautious that, as you mentioned, if someone is actually very, very outspoken or has very bold ideas, could actually shut down someone else. Like, how do you actually manage? Like, how do you, as an orchestrator, as that bus driver, for lack of a better term, do that?
Well, the two things I do in all workshops, at least if the number of, let's say, participants is not more than 20, I'm going to have name cards. I'm going to ask them, please write the name. So I'll be able to call the person out on the name. So that's important. I use that. That creates some kind of familiarity. To the question, how do you actually get to start the conversation? What I always do, the first exercise is actually always combined with doing a presentation. So I don't do any icebreakers. It's a waste of time. Yeah. Like I have colleagues, they're going to draw a cat, and then we see everyone draws a different cat. Well, I knew that before anyway. But the point is, workshops, the biggest problem is time constraints. I'm not going to sacrifice 20 minutes for everyone to stand up and say, I'm the head of the procurement department, I work with blah, blah, blah. It creates no value. But what I always will do, I'll bake it into the first exercise. And the first exercise almost always is what I call is alone together. So I'm going to ask a question, and it can be as simple as, what does project success mean for you? And then if it's a larger group, I'll say everyone one post-it. Yeah. Think you have 3 minutes time. I do everything completely time boxed. I always will have my stopwatch running. After 3 minutes, to 2 minutes, I'm going to say 1 minute left. To 3 minutes, I'm going to look at one of the name cards and say, hey, Frank, do you want to start sharing? So 2 things they understand, everyone in the room is going to share. Yeah. So the first person stands up, comes up and says, oh, my name is Frank. I'm head of procurement and working for the company for the last 20 years. And success would mean the following. So 2 things that you're doing now is, first of all, everyone's going to be able to introduce himself, but you also understand if he talks about success, the role, what does that mean? Because success for the head of procurement might be something completely different as for, I don't know, a manager of the finance department or employee in the call center. And that's the way you break the ice, because people essentially are interested in other humans. And now everyone has to kind of share something about yourself in conversations. When I share something about myself, I make myself vulnerable, because you can say, hey, Sean said that. Yeah. So I can call him up. Why did you say that? But the trick is everyone has to share something, and then everyone is comfortable. And this is why in every workshop, everyone has to do something. And if someone's sitting in the back, that's not permissible. There are very rare exceptions where you can have some, because that would mean someone sitting in the back, listening to everyone, but not sharing anything about himself. So the way you get everyone engaged, and it can be something very short. So you have a workshop about sustainability. What's your sustainability contribution in 2023? People come in, I want to eat less meat, or want to buy myself an electric car, going to put solar panels, whatever it is, yeah? And that makes it human. And then when you're interested in the other human, what they're saying, that's done. So after 10, 15 minutes, people get comfortable. That's interesting. I'm working with that guy for 20 years. I never knew that his goal is actually to eat less meat. Interesting. So once you break it, that brings you to the end of the workshop.
It also, I guess, gives that water cooler chat topic. Sometimes, I guess it gives an opportunity to small talk if you need to take a break or have a follow-up. It could build relationships. But I do like that. I'm quite interested. Icebreakers and not doing them is quite controversial. I see your point. I feel like it's spot on, because sometimes it works. Sometimes people feel like they're wasting time. It's kind of good to keep it focused, something which contributes and is quick. But it kind of segues to one of the things which I wanted to pick your brain on, and it's the controversies of design thinking. And I don't know what are your thoughts, and if you have any, of course, or you kind of, and if you observed the same patterns, but I've seen themes of people in UX. I think there was a quote from Don Norman previously where he said that modern design thinking, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, is it kind of went too far in a way. It's not useful. It's too business focused. Then there is, of course, UXers who are doing the standard UX capability. There are service designers, everyone in between. And it's like, I feel as someone in the industry that there is almost like this transition where design thinking is viewed as a separate thing in a way, or it's viewed in a darker light than it used to be. Have you observed anything like that yourself? Or
I don't know. I had an interesting conversation. I was invited to do a presentation in Interaction South America a few years ago, and I figured out people were kind of really raging around design thinking. That's really rubbish. So I spent a half a day, said, okay, this is interesting. We have, let's say, a few thousand designers. So I sat down and say, hey, you have 10 minutes time here. What do you actually think about design thinking? I was interviewing people, and actually many UX designer actually said design thinking is crap. And there was also a person, she was running an agency, design agency. She said, the one thing I know if a client comes in and says, can you help me with design thinking? I already know that this person has absolutely no clue about design. He was telling me it's a total waste of time. And I think that people are mixing up two things. Yeah, design thinking is a fashion. Let's say his idea was promoting is, oh, we're getting super creative. I don't think that it's really about that. As I said before, it's about putting people, knowledgeable people in a room. And I would see it more as a brain surgery to figure out how are those people thinking, but you're also orchestrating because those people usually don't spend time with each other. So the real art of design thinking is to create or craft human conversations in a meaningful way, but also in a structured way, because your constraint is time. Yeah. Now what you want to do, and that's the reason why I use the poster, is here's an exercise we're going to start. And often people say, why are we doing it? I'm going to be pointing to two things. Well, that's a question because your manager, whoever is the owner of the workshop, said we need to solve the problem. And this is going to generate information. And by the way, once we figure that out, it's going to help me answer the next question and the next one. Because at the end of the day, we want to go home with, let's say, 3 great ideas for MVPs. And everyone understands that. And I think that's the overall trick now. The question is different flavors of design thinking. What does it mean? Who cares? It's a tool. It's like discussing, can I take a hammer only to kind of put a nail? Or can I actually use it to squash a tomato? Or can I use it for something else? Yeah. You can do infinite things. Yeah. Humans are super creative. Like it's a tool. You can do whatever you want as long as it creates purpose. The last thing I want to kind of hone into, you were saying like the quote that, oh, it's too business-like. I always say, and I firmly believe, design thinking are only one thing, it's only a business conversation. Because we need to connect two things. What do you want to build? What is the value that you're creating for someone? It can be an end user for an organization. What does it cost? What's the risk? And who should pay for that in the end of the day? You can have the greatest idea in the world. If you can't figure out who's the sponsor and who's going to pay for it, guess what? It's going to be a dream. Nothing is going to happen. Yeah? And I don't want to spend my time for creating fancy dreams where people say, oh, we're super creative. I come back after half a year, did something happen? No, why not? Oh, we didn't have a sponsor. We had no money. I'm wasting my time. And that's why I think in every workshop, mandatory, no matter what you're working on, if you can prove the business value or value for society or whatever, you're wasting your time. So just ask a question and make it part of your workshop.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I also feel like design thinking is just a tool, just like, let's say, using any other. If you would take something like design sprints, which also has collected a lot of bad rap over a year, I feel like it's only bad, or it's only, there's of course maybe competition and egos to me is a big aspect of that. And maybe some specialties feeling like they're threatened a little bit by someone who might do, solutioning faster, let's say, even if, let's say, it requires more effort perhaps. But I feel like for each challenge, you have to pick the right tool. And I feel like it's not rocket science. It's such a common sense, but we are missing that sometimes where, we're having conversations. What's right to do? Is design thinking right or not? And one of the examples.
Sorry for interrupting, but
no worries.
That's a stupid question. Is it right or wrong? The question is, I need to solve a problem. I've got a tool. Can I solve the problem? If you can solve the problem, it's the right tool. It's simple as that. If you can't, then it's the wrong tool.
Yeah. And as long as you also can frame the problem, that's another thing where you have to start with that. But what I was saying was that example which I picked up, and I don't know where I found it. I'm not going to give it the right credit as it deserves, but it was, I think, one of the consultancies trying to solve the issue of establishing new wells in Africa, in one of the tribes, in one of the communities. And they did that remote. And of course, I'm paraphrasing it. There's a lot more detail to this, but we did that remote in an office with a client who had to establish those wells. And I think the backlash to that, if I remember correctly, was that, it wasn't the right thing to do. You had to interact with the users or the actual people involved. You had to interact with the communities, because you cannot just, ideate, let's say, or try to apply empathy remotely. You kind of need to talk to the real people to do that sometimes. So I feel like that it was a bit of that, where in the end, if you come up with if you just shut the doors in a closed room, you talk to the stakeholders, but the stakeholder who is a human being is not involved, and it's a very far shot, if that makes sense. And that's where I feel like there is a bit of misalignment there.
Yeah, well, yes and no, because reality is you don't always get the people that you want. Like say, if I design a workshop and and that's part of the preparation, I'll say who is going to be participating, and I want to ensure that the people who are in the room can answer the questions. So a very simple example, let's say I'm doing an ideation about a fantastic new app that I want to sell, and it's mandated to talk about, let's say, what's the risk and what's the market value. Question is, who in the room can answer it? If it's only developers, guess what? They won't be able to answer that. So you need to frame the problems to the people who are in the room and can answer the question. They said you can ask questions about where you don't have experts in the room, and their assumption is always going to be much better than what you know. So your example where you said, well, we're doing workshops for people who want to create better wells in Africa. Yes, we didn't have the farmers in the room. Nevertheless, you probably had local people who probably have a much better knowledge than you sitting in the UK or wherever that is. So while I will always try to have the right people in the room, I will, before I kind of kill a workshop, except there's no one there that has knowledge, I will trust that the people working in the domain, knowing their organization, will have something to share. Let's say if I work in the sales department, I'll probably in this large factory might have no clue how they're building their cars, but I heard things about, let's say, problems with supply chains, whatever. They will be able to contribute. And if you're trying to solve a problem and you have no clue, then even murky information is better than nothing. So I would not disregard and say, oh God, we didn't have farmers, so we were not justified to do it. Well, it probably created some kind of information that was helpful to drive it on. And then you can say, hey, this is as far as we got. That really looks good. In order to go the next step, let's please go and get a few farmers and have that conversation. But at least you have something on your table rather than saying, sorry, I can do nothing, just walk away.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm with you 100%, but it kind of comes down to that, looking at everything as either black or white. It's kind of like a very binary view. But to me, it's like, if you take something like, the biggest part in UX for myself, let's say, is UX research. Like you need to understand who you're dealing with, so the solution is right. So you truly understand what pain points you solve. But UX research is all about forming the right hypotheses. And I feel like everything you do in, let's say, design thinking or so would naturally feed into that, because if you use it as a learning opportunity and you get the stakeholders in, together, you come up with something which is informed enough for you to then go and explore and do UX research, let's say, or explore to see exactly strategically that's sound enough. If you can actually kind of link those two pieces together, or a few pieces together in variables, and then do all the different, whatever it is the service, is the product design. But I feel like there is all, like, it's a tool for a challenge, right? Like, and it has to be the right challenge.
Yeah, I think if you talk about user research, and I believe actually design thinking workshops are user research, even if the user is not in there, because in order to build a product, you need two things. You need a demand, that means an end user who has the real need, or you can do a lot of advertising, so the end user believes it's a need. Who cares? That's another. But the second thing you need is an organization that's actually going to execute. So what you can do in design thinking workshops, and what's often underestimated, is, where are the end users? And they're not invited, so we can't do it. Well, what you're actually doing in that workshop is you're doing user research with people from the organization. So when you leave the room, you understand how the organization works. And if you understand how the organization works, you have the opportunity to shape the program, the project, in a way that they can execute it. And that's equally valuable for actually solving the problem. So they might have a very clear way, this is what we want. We want to build this new consumer app, yeah? And the problem might not even be that we don't, I don't know, let's say we're building for underbanked people, so people who have no access to banking, yeah? So we understand the problem. They need to deal with money, they have no bank account. The biggest problem might be the managers sitting in a Swiss bank, yeah? That don't understand how they're going to bring it through their organization. So what you're doing in the workshop is you're doing research on the organization that's doing the workshop to figure out how you can shape the project so they can actually do it. So in the end, design thinking workshop is always user research in some way, either with the end users or with the people in the workshop, because that's going to help you understand and it's going to give them a structure that they can actually build what they want to achieve on the end of the day.
Definitely. No, I'm with you on that. I'm definitely with you on that. Another quote, and sorry to get back to that and kind of break a bit of a loop, but I just, like just to pick your brain, which maybe is quite relevant, but even from your book of moderator training, by the way, for anyone listening or watching this podcast, make sure to pick it up. I feel like you condensed a lot of knowledge there and a lot of your ideas, like almost every page has something which you could kind of clip off and kind of put aside. And there's a lot of those quotes, but even in the beginning of the book, you're kind of stating that design thinking is all about creating, I don't want to butcher it. The only purpose of design thinking workshop is to create organizational value by creating revenue or saving money.
Yes.
But that's kind of like the end result, right? Like that's how you feel like if you would apply design thinking and you go through that process and you talk to people, you're going to end up there. Or like what's your thinking? Because I know for sure that every ever listener or every ever viewer who's going to watch it, they're going to be like, oh, but design thinking really is just about the human being. There's almost like the commercial side is not really there. Like, but from your perspective,
yeah, but that's totally ridiculous. Yeah, but that's totally ridiculous. And I have in my former company where I worked, we had a lot of discussions. They said like that, and they had, let's say, hey, we can speak about design thinking in 15 minutes, and it was like top managers from all of the organization. So it was in Finland, and we had a long discussion. Said, hey, what you're going to go out? You're going to be talking about money. Why? Yeah, why should we be talking about money? Well, reality is, no one cares about those fantastic ideas. They're all worthless until you find a structure, someone who's going to support you do it. Like, do we actually have a problem if we have people starving in the world? Is it a technical problem that we can't give them food? No. It's a money problem. Yeah. And that's true for everything. And life is really short. You don't want to waste your time building some ideas that can't be kind of converted into real projects. You will always need someone who's going to support you. That can be society, yeah? And in the end, if you think, for example, about sustainability, yeah? People go and have demonstrations, they complain, they make all kinds of noise. What are they actually doing? They're creating enough traction that every organization and every government in the world says, hey, we're going to reserve at least 10 or 20 or 30% to do something against climate change. And as long as they have no money, nothing's going to happen. That's reality.
Sure.
And that's why I'm kind of obsessed. If we can't figure out the business value, yeah, then it's just a dream. Yeah? And let's go and ask those questions. The nice thing about it, and that's the positive aspect, is there are many great ideas where people have real problem articulating the business value. They go to the managers, hey, we want to do that. That's fantastic, blah, blah, blah. Yeah? He's going to say, yeah, I have my stakeholders, my shareholders, whatever. How should I finance that? Yeah. If they can't give the answer, it won't happen. If you can give them the answer, you say, great. So I can help you. I can do some business. I can save the world. Let's do all of that at the same time. So I don't see this disconnect and what should be bad about saying I need a business value to actually make the project happen.
Definitely. And I feel like this is I don't know, like I feel like a lot of maybe more growing designers, but they come with this expectation that and it also forms these, I guess, unhealthy dynamics where, let's say, UX or researcher, strategist, designer, and then business. Like, to me, it's also realizing that you are there for a reason. It doesn't matter if you do design thinking, if you're exploring in through service design, or maybe you're diving into a specific app. Sure, you are doing it for the user, and that's your skill set, that's your expertise and forte, but you're there for a reason usually, unless you are, but even then, if you're part of, let's say, something like a nonprofit or like something like a green cause, let's say, or something to do with sustainability or forward facing type of activities, you're still there to generate some sort of value because you have to sustain that. And I'm in total agreement with you that you can't have projects if they're not commercially viable, or you cannot have, let's say, you could have a cause, but still everything comes down to the monetary value, because that's the currency we kind of communicate and exchange the value and try to invest and double down on the things and solutionize, I guess.
I mean, the other thing that you often see and what I don't get is like people say, oh, we don't want to talk about money, it's evil, yeah, and we're founding the startup, we're all idealists. And then a venture capitalist comes and says, hey, you've got 500 million. Oh, thanks, I'm going to take it, yeah? So what entitles this person to give you 500 million? Because that's a business-oriented person. He believes in your idea. Yeah. So they're happy to accept that, but they don't want to talk about the business value of what they're creating, and I don't get it. So I don't think there's anything evil about talking about money. Yeah. There's nothing evil about actually earning money. The question is what you're going to do with it is a different question, but per se, it's nothing bad. And we as designers, I often see designers that say, oh, business is not listening to us. My question is always, well, what do you understand about business? Well, we don't know. Well, it's your job to sit down and you have to be able to think like a business person. If you expect the business people are going to be thinking like designers, then first do your job, your due diligence, and try to understand their part of the view before you ask them to kind of opt in and see everything from the design side.
Definitely. And that's also maybe just to extract one bit, I feel like it's going to be useful for those who are just getting into design, or even I get a lot of questions from people who struggle to get to senior roles or more strategic roles. And I feel like there is a big chasm to cross, because this is where you need to start thinking you have to become organizationally minded. You need to understand exactly how business operates and how do you actually make money, because you cannot become a senior. You cannot even be promoted to those roles if your contribution doesn't kind of expand and affect how the business operates, but that's another topic. Like we could talk for hours on that. One thing, what I wanted to really, really hear, from you is the future of design thinking or workshops specifically through pandemic. And I feel like we are getting back to a bit of a hybrid in office, in person type of working patterns. But I'm sure you had a lot of learnings from going totally virtual or doing things remote. Like, where do you have any reflections on that, or maybe even thoughts of ideas of like how could we do better going forward, or like what's going to be different?
Well, two things. I think, first of all, it's not going to go away. Yeah. Let's say before the pandemic, I would have refused to do a virtual workshop, and I've done about 300 during the pandemic. It was crazy, but it was also an interesting learning. But the one thing I clearly can see is the problem is that in virtual workshops, you build no human connections. And that's a big problem, because design thinking workshops have multiple, let's say, layers. So in many cases, let's say in the start of a large project, you have a design thinking workshop. What you're actually doing is it's a test if the relationship can work. So imagine Microsoft, we're doing a large project with a customer. We're putting 20 people in a room, they're spending one day. What are you going to figure out in the end of the day on a human level? Do they match? Can they work together as a team? So positive experience, hey, we can actually solve a challenge, and it could be almost anything, who cares what it is. but we can solve a challenge from two different organizations. And that creates a human bond, yeah? And that's something you can do in person. Now, in an abstract level, in a virtual workshop, yes, you can solve problems, but you don't create the human connections. I had a lot of design thinking workshops with one customer, even 15 workshops, and it was like worldwide with people from different countries. You have no clue who those people are, and even if you would meet them in let's say, in the subway or somewhere, it's not like you know that person. So that's the one level. But the second level is many of those workshops are built about creating corporations or, let's say, projects, and there's a business aspect to that. Now, you're not going to buy a product, you're not going to sign a $200 million deal with someone you just met online. So you can use design thinking workshops in a virtual space for, let's say, specific problem solving. And what I say is you can extract information, but what it's not going to help you is actually sign a deal, get to know someone else, and build trust, which is super important for successful projects, because the one thing is scoping the project, knowing what you're doing, but you also need to create trust and bond, because a project can be a multi-year collaboration, and it starts with people sitting in a room and agreeing we want to do it. We trust each other. No matter what happens, we're going to figure it. A little bit like getting married, and that won't happen online. So that's the one observation. And the second observation is, and I would maybe compare it between, if you love music and you go to a real concert, and it makes a difference, is a rock concert, a classic concert, no one can tell me standing in that stadium with 40,000 people is exactly the same thing as putting my earphones on and listening to that music.
Yeah.
So it is two different things. So the music is the same, but it has two very different objectives. And no matter how good my earphones are, it's never going to be as if I'm in the stadium listening to that concert. And you just need to understand that the one thing is just a part, and it won't ever substitute the other. They will never be equal.
Yeah, it's totally different experience, I have to say. And it's, I also wanted to ask you about if you had any thoughts about metaverse and doing design thinking in VR, but I feel like you kind of almost answered it, because it's like the medium also shapes your experience. You ultimately, as a facilitator or design thinker, you're creating an experience for someone, like a workshop experience. And if you do it remotely, it's gonna be different. Like someone is gonna sit at the table, their experience is gonna be very different. They're gonna be even holding the mouse from a UX perspective. They're gonna look at their screens. Their lighting might be different than someone else's. All the different factors have to be considered, from ergonomics to a specific even pen usage or their keyboard, or like so many things you cannot anticipate. And you have that medium where you are, let's say, on Teams or let's say Google Meets or something else. It's very different from being in one room. And it would be even totally different if you are at VR, because it becomes more about interacting with a screen or interacting with an avatar versus interacting with a human being. Like that's my sleek take, which
yeah,
I feel
think
like
interacting with an avatar makes no sense to me, and the reason why is because I'll be very open on that. Yeah, maybe people don't want to hear it, but the point is it's very hard to understand humans. Yeah, like even if you're married with a person or you've got a relation for many years, you know this person, you meet them every day, it's still very hard to understand the person. And everything, yeah. If I'm talking with you, like I can see your face, yeah. I see your reactions, you smile or kind of like you wrinkle or whatever. Like the reaction, the expression is super important. Now you're taking away one more information channel that I need to understand what you're talking about. So why should I want to do it? Is it gonna happen? Yes. Yeah. But for me, that would mean physical workshops with people is like, here can extract the maximum number of information. Virtual workshop with cameras, on or not, at least I can hear your voice. Gives me less information, but still, if I'm gonna go into the metaverse, Now I'm kind of frustrated or confused with additional visual clues. It's not going to help me understand who you are as a person, and in the end I can't even figure out like how do you really look like. Yeah, you could have an avatar that you, I don't know, you're super muscular, you're 2 meters 50, you're a basketball player, and you're completely the contrary or the other way around. So it
Yeah.
will happen, but maybe I'm just too old for that, but I don't see the point.
No, I'm with you. Again, it's also, the concept of ontological design too, of where even our behaviors are shaped by the things which surround us. So people behave differently in the office, people behave differently at their desk. They are going to behave differently in a concert or a metaverse. Like there's always like our environment literally shapes who we are in a way. So that's another thing. But yeah, I mean, this has been extremely valuable for me, and I'm sure people who listened in, are gonna benefit from it. Where can people find more about you? Like, what's the easiest way to find you, to connect with you?
Yeah, I have a LinkedIn group. That's the only social media since I scrapped Twitter since Elon Musk took over. So that was the second channel, but I don't use it anymore. But the only thing I have is LinkedIn group. Yeah. And
That's Billboard Design Thinking,
yes.
right? Amazing. Well, thank you, Sean. It's been a pleasure, and I hope to have you more, on this podcast and connect with you in the future.
Thanks a lot. It's always interesting talking with you and kind of sharing and listening to your thoughts.
Awesome.
Happy design thinking, as I always say. Hope to
Happy
see you in a
design.
workshop somewhere in 2023 in person, preferably.
Yeah. Likewise. Cool.